Years ago my Lyndon 30M wife, Bridget 29F, and her identical twin sister, Sandra 29F, set me up. They had the most extreme twin bond you can imagine. They tricked me into impregnating them both at the same time. I was extremely upset and felt violated. Everyone else told either laughed at me, downplayed it, or told me to man up. I went to the police, they couldn't help. I wanted to divorce my wife, and the lawyer explained how financially fucked I would be. Bridget and Sandra ended up getting what they wanted. Sandra moved into the house Bridget and I rented. During their pregnancies things had at least a sense of normalcy. Sandra had her own room, and Bridget and I shared the other. I knew we needed a bigger place, and that once the babies were born this wouldn't work out at all. I hated being around Sandra, but Bridget always insisted on her joining us for everything. Eventually I just gave in to this being the norm. We got two of everything and began setting up Sandra's room as a nursery. The sisters just kept telling me that one of them would sleep in there each night to be close to the babies, which were both confirmed to be boys. We got to the 38 weeks mark, and they both scheduled C-sections for the same day. They were adamant that the boys be born on the same day. The boys, Trevor, Bridget's, and Terrence, Sandra's, were born a few hours apart. I am ashamed of this, but I really didn't want to acknowledge Sandra's child. Once I saw him I couldn't help but fall in love with my son. The two babies look so much alike. A doctor did explain that genetically speaking they are full siblings since their mothers are identical twins and they have the same father. Mom spent 2 days recovering after the birth in the hospital. Their mother, Robin Pt4, who used to be so sweet to me, now acts like I am some monster who has taken advantage of both her daughters. She was there the whole time, and kept making snide comments that I mostly ignored. Their dad, Carrie 56M, however, has kind of become a kindred spirit over the past few years. That all began in the hospital during the births. I guess I never noticed how broken he was. Robin just never lets up on him, and you can tell he's miserable. The girls are pretty hard on him too, not as bad as Robin but still hard on him. I get it now. He's been doing this for like 30 years. I am starting to feel like he looks, and I've only been doing it a fifth of that time. Once we got home, the mood turned hard. They both seemed to have a lot of needs and were asking me for help constantly. I was trying to be supportive to both of them, even though I still harbored a lot of anger towards Sandra. I wanted to make things work for a while because I wanted the boys attached to me. This kind of backfired on me though, because I didn't pick up on the signs. The twins were grooming me for the life I'd been living. It began small, with the sleeping arrangement. I quickly got relegated to couch sleeping. The boys would be in bed with both Sandra and Bridget often. The other thing that would happen is one of them would sleep in the boys' room, while the other proclaimed they needed a break and would sleep alone in the master bedroom. Our arrangement became me staying at home with Trevor and Terrence during the day while the twins were at work. Then I worked nights at my uncle's bar. With 3 incomes, the financial side of raising 2 newborns was easier. While this was physically draining, I was okay with it because it gave me a lot of one-on-2 time with my sons. My marriage to Bridget did not recover. While she was still making some effort to play husband and wife, it was very self-serving. She had her sister at home with her, so she leaned on her emotionally. We would still cuddle and have sex, but that was on her terms only. I endured it. It got weird about a year post-birth. One night I was asked if I would get Sandra off. The girls had been talking and Sandra had revealed that she hadn't had much time to date and was getting a bit frustrated. I was against it at first, but they managed to convince me. It was pretty easy. I hadn't had Bridget in 3 weeks when they asked. Everything was fine, but once she got hers, she just stopped. The next day they told me that they thought it best that I not finish, because it would make it weird. As if it wasn't already fucking batshit crazy. 2 years went like this. I was relegated to butler/living sex toy/daycare. They weren't mean, they were manipulative. I didn't even realize it at the time. I would get used and used until I became really depressed, then Bridget would pick up the sex frequency and Sandra would start finishing me off. The affection would also pick up. I'd get compliments, they'd come home with a gift or something for me. Take the kids out for a whole day and tell me to enjoy the game. I only agreed to not divorce and run because I was trying to save myself financially and have a shot at custody of Trevor. I had completely lost myself in this process, and didn't even notice that I was becoming a shell of my former self. Then it took another wild swing. Both Bridget and Sandra moved up to manager positions at work. The raises were good, and they decided we finally needed a bigger place. We found a 4-bedroom house to rent. It was spectacular having my own bed, and designated play space for the kids' things. For the first time in 2 years we weren't living in clutter. It was at this time they became overly nice to me. I thought it was because we had more space and that made things less stressful. I had one of them taking me to bed seemingly every night. That lasted a few weeks. Then they told me they were both pregnant again and things immediately went back to normal. You would think that would snap me out of my fog, but it didn't. I went along with all of it even longer. I was back to being the live-in nanny and butler. I thought everything would be okay. I had the boys and soon would have 2 more kids. Bridget and Sandra made a special appointment at the 12-week mark to determine the sex of the baby. This is almost as early as this can be done with ultrasound. I thought it was premature and also asked if we could be surprised. They let me know that was completely out of the question. The day of the ultrasound I was not included. When they got back it was just minutes before my shift and I was trying to get info out of them. They just ignored me and said they didn't want to talk about it. I had to go to work and wonder, knowing everyone would be asleep when I got home. I got home at my usual time of about 1:30 a.m. No one was still up, but they had left an envelope on the table. I opened it up and it showed that Bridget was carrying a little girl and Sandra another little boy. I was excited. I always hoped to have both boys and girls. The next day I was watching the boys and decided to take them out to lunch in the afternoon. When we returned, Bridget and Sandra were both home. This was highly unusual. They seemed to be having a lot of discomfort. I asked them if they were okay, and Sandra said, "We're fine, just supposed to take a day and recover." I responded, "Recover from what?" Bridget began, "Look, I don't want you to get all upset, so can you just not?" We had to abort. With a quivering voice I said, "What?" Sandra said, "They weren't the same sex, they couldn't be identical twins." Bridget finished, "We will try again next month." Now please, don't make a big deal, we're both really uncomfortable. My heart fell out of me. I could not believe they would do this. I wanted to scream, no, I wanted to beat them senseless. I instead went into my room. I let the emotion, and I felt the fog lift. It was weird, it felt like a literal fog had been removed from inside my head and in front of my eyes. I for the first time in years was seeing clearly. The way I was treated, used, manipulated. The way I didn't matter to them. I vowed that day to get vengeance for what they had done. It's taken years of work and planning, but I finally pulled it off. I'm finally rid of them, and served those bitches a big dose of karma.